Now, like I always say, when we look at Disney and specifically Lucasfilm, they have been very much relentless and very much getting, of course, their point across that they don't care about the fans, they don't care about the fandoms or the communities that really have supported things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones over the years, and just keep on doubling down regardless of losing money. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into exactly what's going on here with Kathleen Kennedy, the Hollywood bubble, and everything to do with major Hollywood studios restricting Kathleen Kennedy and banishing her exactly, and why it has been happening behind closed doors, and what the real root of the issue was with Kathleen Kennedy and the major Hollywood studios. Now, we know one thing about Indy 5 right now is that Indy 5 was a big wake-up call, not just for a lot of fans out there, including myself, that Lucasfilm and Disney are going to continue to double down, for the most part, on a lot of their projects up and coming. We do have John and Dave that are really attempting to course correct the franchise with Ahsoka and Mando Season 4 for starters, as well as Season 2 of Ahsoka to turn things around. But we also have things like The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, which, by the way, are Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland driven products that are going to steer away from George Lucas's philosophy. Now, getting down to the real story here, but what really happened behind closed doors, and why Kathleen Kennedy was banished/fired from Hollywood in general, has a lot to do with this. Now, with Indy 5 and its release just around the corner, Kathleen Kennedy has been making some last-minute decisions by pouring more money into the Dial of Destiny's marketing at last minute, with Disney's approval to boost engagement levels. However, behind the scenes, many major studios in Hollywood have restricted Kathleen Kennedy and have called off deals, as it turns out, that were in the talks between Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, and other major Hollywood studios. One of the big developments involving the banishment of Kathleen Kennedy from Hollywood was that she was in the talks to become a part of future projects with Universal and even other major Hollywood studios like Warner Brothers and even Paramount. She was in talks of becoming an executive producer of many up-and-coming projects, as she was planning to anticipate her removal from Lucasfilm and used her husband Frank Marshall to use his contacts to make said deals happen. Now, this was all last minute and was all called off as of late, with other Hollywood studios as well that were in the talks with Kennedy to take on executive producing other major franchises. Now, let me pause here quick for a second. So we've talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how a lot of major studios were calling off, any kind of future deals or involvement with Kathleen Kennedy. But as it turns out, in this recent development, there were talks and there were discussions and deals in the works to have Kathleen Kennedy executive produce a lot of up-and-coming material, be it Universal or Warner Brothers, Paramount, etc. They were going to eventually have Kathleen Kennedy come on board. They didn't realize how bad it was going to get with Indy 5, and once Cannes Film Festival came out and about, where the critics themselves were even very blunt and honest about this movie, that it was so bad to the point that they had to drop Kathleen Kennedy out of those said deals, even though they love Frank Marshall and are very close with Frank Marshall. That's how bad it really is, and that's how big of a wake-up call the Dial of Destiny really is, not just for us, but for a lot of major Hollywood studios out there. It's the main reason why Universal is waking up with the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and how they don't want to sabotage anything like that with their momentum that they're getting from a lot of fans right now as well. But here's the kicker, is that Kathleen Kennedy wanted to continue dismantling other franchises out there. And we're going to get into that in just a second. Now, we know that Kathleen Kennedy, as I like to call her, the disaster artist or the destroyer of franchises, whatever you may call her, Empress Kennedy, etc. But all jokes aside, anything that she touches comes to ruin. And it's true. It's 100% true. We're going to see this happen again with The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew this year. Alright, Skeleton Crew comes out in November to December. You're going to witness that before your very own eyes during the holiday season, essentially. So moving on. Now get this, there was a point in time in which Kathy even suggested, the magical word is suggested, to Universal of embracing a Back to the Future remake, since she took part in the originals and wanted a new updated vision, either in live action or even animated material, though Universal almost immediately shot that down. After the reviews came in from Cannes Film Festival, Kathy was essentially fired from Hollywood as a bubble and banished from all major studios for the most part except Disney so far. However, Frank Marshall is endlessly now using his contacts to try and reverse these restrictions to lift them to give Kathy a future in the film industry since she plans to never retire. Kennedy is still reportedly developing her own studio, Starlight Productions, to open by 2025 if major studios never lift their restrictions, and Kathy Kennedy and is her only way to embrace film again so far beyond Lucasfilm if that comes to fail. So here's another deal about this, is that Frank Marshall, her husband, it almost comes across like she's using the guy, right? Just using her own husband as a contact source to get her way in the film industry. And, you know, it's kind of funny when you look at her at all these premieres, she's always with him, really kind of just making it like they're a pair. And in the film industry, of course, in the Hollywood bubble, in which they are to a degree, and they have been to a degree, especially with the Indiana Jones films, I just found it so funny that Spielberg really went out of his way to snub both Frank and Kathleen about how important it was to reference them, and not reference them, I should say, about how Indiana Jones became so successful. He did that on stage. Completely ignored them on stage. They both looked very annoyed at Spielberg and just walked away. So here's the other problem about all of this, is that she even suggested remaking Back to the Future to Universal. Now, granted, this is not happening, don't get too worried about this, but that just goes to show you how crazy she really is, that she wanted to remake the series, or remake the franchise, to better fit the real world today. And we all know what was going to happen if that actually came to a reality, right? Back to the Future easily would have been agenda-driven garbage. It would have been terrible, and they would have never done this right from the get-go anyways. Universal was smart to shoot that down. You can't touch a franchise like that. We've seen what she did with Star Wars. We've seen what she has done with Indiana Jones. Even though a lot of those are sequels, she wanted to remake BTTF, and it would have been a failure right off the bat. So anyways, I'm glad that Hollywood studios are taking a stand, and as it turns out, behind closed doors, that's the reason why they called off their supposed deals from Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall, is because it's all rooted back to the Dial of Destiny and how Cannes Film Festival and its critics were so very honest about it. So overall, guys, I would really, really love to hear what you guys have to say about all of this below in the comments involving Kathleen Kennedy and the Hollywood bubble. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I love you guys, and I will catch you guys next time.
From night to moon, we hear them moans again.